Well, now you got into this mess by going down a waterfall. Now, how would you suppose we get them out of there?
By going up the waterfall?
That's right. Anything's possible in Disneyland.
At the far end of Wilderness Road stands Fort Wilderness, the outpost of civilization. The time is the War of 1812. The United States flag only has 15 stars. Within the gates, there is a canteen and trading post stocked with pelts, guns, knives, and Indian craft. In the regimental headquarters, Davy Crockett and George Russell, U.S. Army Scouts, can be seen reporting to Major General Andrew Jackson during the Cherokee Indian Campaign. From the parapets and blockhouses can be seen the vast, untamed American wilderness, the deer, moose, bear, and wildlife of the primitive forest. Beyond the stockade are teepees, hostile Indians on the warpath. A settler's cabin burns in the distance, mute evidence of a treacherous attack. Tom Sawyer Island brochure, 1956. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive episode of Up the Waterfall, where, as you may have guessed, our topic is Tom Sawyer Island and the history thereof.
I'm very excited for this one.
I'm your host, Zanna Otis, with my co-host here, Scott Otis.
Hello, everyone.
As we dive deep into the history of Tom Sawyer Island.
I'm excited, yeah. So actually, as most of you probably know, Walt, he wasn't born on the Mississippi River, but he did, his childhood, his early childhood was in Marceline, Missouri, which is actually very close to where Mark Twain grew up. A lot of people don't know this, but actually Mark Twain was born in Florida. Did you know that?
What? I think I did know that.
Not the state of Florida, but Florida, Missouri.
Oh, right.
A small town in Missouri. But he grew up in Hannibal, Missouri, which was not too far off from Walt's childhood home of Marceline, Missouri. And growing up, Walt actually was very fascinated with the stories of Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer, and the adventures of Huckleberry Finn and all that. And so it was a natural that eventually Tom Sawyer and all of that would
play a part.
That's right. But it wasn't always that way. When the park was being designed, actually nobody knew what they were going to do with this island. The island existed kind of as a way to have the Mark Twain riverboat go around. It's kind of like shaped like a dog bone in that way. Eventually, they didn't really know what to do with it. And Walt actually, he took the blueprints home one night, and he actually laid the whole island out all by himself in his barn.
Wow.
He has a drafting table in his barn, and he did that, and he brought it in one day, and he kind of showed off where all of the inlets and the features of the island would be. So a lot of people don't know that Walt actually designed a good chunk of Tom Sawyer Island himself. During the construction of Disneyland, they actually didn't really know what they were going to do yet with the island. Originally, it was actually going to be a Mickey Mouse Island, home of the Mickey Mouse Club, which hadn't even aired yet. Because as you remember, the introduction of the Mickey Mouse Club was on the opening day of Disneyland. And wasn't to premiere on television until October of 1955.
Wow. I think I didn't know that.
And so the tree house that on the southern tip of the island, which is actually the highest point on Tom Sawyer Island, was originally going to be the Mickey Mouse clubhouse. But then they decided, I think it's better for them to be in Fantasyland.
That does make more sense.
And originally, it was also going to be Treasure Island, but that didn't really last too long either. And they thought at one point that they would have little vignettes of a lot of American icons, such as Mount Vernon and Monticello, along the riverbanks of
wow.
the island that people would be able to see from the steamboat. That didn't last long either. And eventually the Imagineers, they thought, you know what's a perfect fit for this is Tom Sawyer Island. And that's actually when they decided to call the riverboat the Mark Twain. And all of it was a kind of a perfect match. By opening day, though, there actually was nothing on the island except for a few uninhabited Indian tents on the far end. And it really wasn't until in between the opening of July of 1955 and the opening of Tom Sawyer Island, which was the following year, in June of 1956, that's when all of the development took place and the construction of everything on the island. There actually was a massive billboard that was placed at the where the steamboat is, like a 10-foot tall billboard that was kind of like a coming soon kind of a thing.
Wow.
It actually had June 1st, 1956 as the opening day. But it was a wonderful map that showed all the different features that people were going to be able to experience once the thing opened in June of 1956. It was part of a $2 million expansion for the entire park that included the openings of, that's when the canal boats of the world turned to the Storybook Land canal boats. They introduced the Skyway, the Astrojets, and the Rainbow Caverns mine train. So it was kind of a big year for, a lot of changes at Disneyland. They actually had a lot of advertisements in local newspapers.
It's true. I've got one here, and it's very funny because it was done in the 50s. So I love reading these in my 50s voice. Now open at Disneyland, another new attraction, Tom Sawyer's Island. Cross the river on a raft, explore Injun Joe's Cave, walk the suspension bridge, visit Fort Wilderness, see the burning settler's cabin, relive exciting days out of America's lusty past. Ooh, lusty. Explore all the magical mysteries of an island built just for fun. Whatever you want to do, you will find fun and excitement for the whole family in this newest Disneyland attraction, Tom Sawyer's Island, which is interesting because it's Sawyer's Island.
Yeah, that's right.
Apostrophe. The happiest place on earth is growing, adding new acres of smiles, new laugh-a-minute rides, now open every day, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then over here it says, well, that's all about admission, but it says more room, more rides, more fun. I cannot read this last.
Is that where it gets super tiny?
Hold on. It's Walt Disney's Magic Kingdom, Disneyland. Santa Ana Freeway and Harbor Boulevard.
That's right. The intersection of this.
Anaheim. Okay. And then there's a cute little drawing of the raft with people on it, and the distance with the Fort Wilderness and all that stuff. So that's very fun.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, this was part of a massive expansion of Disneyland, and it did finally open on June 16th, 1956. And actually, they had in attendance there the best Tom Sawyer and the best Becky Thatcher, which was a contest that they held annually in Hannibal, Missouri. And they brought the kids over for the opening of Tom Sawyer Island, and they were introduced there. And they actually got to, after the opening ceremonies, they got to follow Walt around and kind of be like the first ones through the cave and in the fort, and basically got to explore the island first.
I'm looking at a picture of them right now. It's very cute.
Yeah, I think the girl is holding up a little chalkboard sign that says, "I love Tom."
No, it says, "I love you."
Oh my gosh, I got it wrong.
Maybe she was fickle and she just was going to give it to anyone she saw that day.
I'm pretty sure that it was for Tom. Another thing that they had there, in Frontierland on opening day of the entire park, they had like a little photo area where you could get your picture taken with, as you mentioned, Andrew Jackson.
Oh, right.
And Davy Crockett and George Russell. But those figures were actually moved to Tom Sawyer Island inside in the fort there, and where they remained for many, many years. I think Andrew Jackson is still there to this very day.
Wow. In Disneyland?
In Disneyland. But anyway, a lot of the features that they had there, as you as I may have mentioned, is the Injun Joe's Cave, which was a very serpentine cave with lots of ways to get lost and very spooky little things inside. There was a grist mill, a suspension bridge, the burning settler's cabin that you mentioned, the Fort Wilderness, as well as a bunch of other features. There was Catfish Cove.
Were there catfish there?
Well, that's the thing. They actually stocked the rivers of America with catfish and other kinds of fish, and you could actually go fishing from the pier there. You could buy a little can of worms and rent a pole and go fishing, and you were even able to keep what you caught. And they would have actually, that's where Tom Nabby came from. Walt hired Tom Nabby personally to portray sometimes Tom Sawyer and sometimes Huckleberry Finn. And one of his jobs there was to kind of help guests put the worm on the hook and bait the hook and also wrap up the fish if you were to get that. And you could carry it around with you through the parks.
Sounds great.
Yeah, and eventually they stopped doing that because, as you can imagine, people didn't really want to carry around a fish all day long.
Makes sense.
So they would kind of ditch it in various places, and the whole place became rather a little stinky. A couple other things. They had the pontoon bridge, the Lookout Point, which is where the tree house was, which actually was the highest point in Disneyland that a guest could go to.
Wow.
It was actually really high up. Pirate's Den, the Merry-Go-Round Rock, the Teeter-Totter Rock, a cemetery out behind Fort Wilderness, as well as the Chamber of the Bottomless Pit within Injun Joe's Cave. A lot of fun things. Another interesting thing is when they opened the island, of course, they had to get guests to the islands. That's when they introduced the rafts to Tom Sawyer Island, and it's very interesting how the river traffic came to be. Because as I mentioned, the Mark Twain steamboat opened with the park in July of 1955. Later that same year, in December, the Mike Fink keelboats were introduced. They had the Gully Whumper and the Bertha May, and then Tom Sawyer Island rafts. Initially, there were just two, the Tom Sawyer and the Huck Finn, in June of 1956. Then they added the Indian War Canoes in July of 1956, just 1 month later. And then they expanded. They were adding more features to the island, so they needed a couple more rafts. So they introduced the Becky Thatcher and Injun Joe rafts. Ooh. And there were two rafts that actually came from the Indian Village, which is kind of like where the rafts launch from now. And those rafts would actually go to where the Fort Wilderness is. Mm. And if you think about where, kind of like where Pirates of the Caribbean is now, that is actually where the initial raft launch was from. Because there was actually a waterway that connected the rivers of America to the Jungle Cruise. Did you know that? And there was a bridge right there. And that's where the water would actually go and flow down into the Jungle Cruise.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's where the initial launch there was from. And it went to kind of where the docks are now, where they had the catfish. So there were a couple of different launching points. They had those rafts introduced in July of 1957, and then the sailing ship Columbia was added in June of 1958. So just in those 3 short years, the river traffic grew exponentially. Yeah. Which is kind of how it is even to this day, minus the
keelboats.
The keelboats.
Why did they get rid of those? Do you know?
Well, because they often keeled over.
I'll get into my memories of the keelboats later, but
okay.
I've never been on one, so.
Really?
No.
Well, see, one of the things I remember is I grew up going to Disneyland. I just remember always exploring the areas and, just being let free. Climbing up to the tallest point. And what was interesting about that is they had, right under the treehouse on top of that highest point, they had 3 rivers kind of flowing literally from underneath the tree that then gushed out into the rivers of America. And I always wondered, where did that water come from?
I remember when we went there most recently, you and I, you being very excited to show me all those water things.
Yeah, the most very recent time that I was there, those waterfalls were actually dry.
Oh,
It was
sad.
Yeah, it was very sad. And also, Injun Show's cave was closed, not because it was eventually being closed, but because I think they were having some stinky issues inside, and they didn't really want anybody to go in there, and so they were trying to clean that up. So it just so happened I missed out on that. But there were all kinds of things like Castle Rock and lots of little serpentine caves and entry points and things like that I just would get lost seeing. And then I would also be able to go into Fort Wilderness, climb the little parapets, and go all the way around. That's when they had actually rifles, kind of like on...
Oh, right.
In the rifle roost where you'd be able to see out. I think they had issues with that. I think a child got his little finger caught in one of those at one point.
Oh, yeah. I think it was a little girl. I was just reading about that.
And then also they had an escape route. Kind of like a little back hidden exit out of the cabin that took you down a set of stairs into another set of caves where you can kind of escape out of the fort. And I remember I always used to, trick my sisters, tell them that I was over here, and then I would get out, escape out of the fort that way, and then sneak up on them unexpectedly.
You were such a naughty brother.
I tried to be.
Believe it or not, I mean, you probably can believe it. I did not visit Tom Sawyer Island here in Walt Disney World until like 2012, I think.
Oh my gosh.
And the only reason I went is Ryan P. Wilson from the Main Street Gazette was coming down for one of his visits. And I think I had told him that I had never been. And he's like, well, we should go. I'll give you a whole tour. And so he did. And I did a 3-part series of pictorial review on Zannaland back then. And I was shocked that I hadn't been. And of course, then after that, I brought, when I had little baby Geo back to run around. It was a super fun place to explore. And I was sad that I missed it in the 70s, I guess.
What was funny about that day that you visited Ryan P. Wilson was I think he was only with you half of that day. And
probably.
The other half, he was meeting up with another friend, which was me.
Whoa.
And that was really before we even knew each other.
Yeah.
And I think we later learned that we both met up with him on that same day.
Wow. The wonders of Tom Sawyer Island.
But I don't remember visiting Tom Sawyer Island with him that day.
Oh.
But I think he had been Tom Sawyer Island out.
Yeah.
I remember there's actually a personal story with me from my high school graduation in 1988.
Is this the story I think it is?
It is that story. Should I mention it?
I mean, you've already started now. You might as well.
Yeah, basically I was gifting myself, and I graduated in, as I mentioned, 1988 in Texas. But literally the day after my high school graduation, I gifted myself a trip to Disney World.
Huh,
and
nice
so... And I remember on our high school graduation, there were like 5 or 6 of us kind of talking about our summer plans. We were all seated together, based alphabetically, and I was at the end of the O's. One of my friends who was beginning of the P's, he and I both didn't really talk about what we were going to do. And later, I actually ran into him literally on that high school graduation trip of mine. Where did I run into him? But in Injun Joe's cave at Disney World, where we were kind of messing around in there, just
messing around.
There was a place where you could kind of hide off to the side and like tap guests on the shoulder right as they were coming in from the bright lights of the day, and then going into a dark cave, which was not lit at the time, so they'd be completely blind. Just kind of fumbling around in the dark, and you could actually like tap them on the shoulder or kind of knock their caps off. I was a dumb high school kid. But anyway, I ran into him. He was doing that, and we kind of did that for about a half an hour, he and his brother.
I was going to say the 70s, but that wasn't the 70s.
No, that was the 80s, but it was funny that happened on Tom Sawyer Island.
Wow.
Actually, I didn't even really talk about the opening of Disney World's
Right.
Tom Sawyer Island, which actually happened on May 20th of 1973, which was actually like a year and a half after the opening of the Magic Kingdom. So it also was not an opening day attraction. And so they developed that over the course of the first year and a half. And some of the things that they did have an Injun Joe's Cave, which was a little even more serpentine than the other one. But they also had the Old Scratch's Mystery Mine Cave, which I guess you wouldn't necessarily remember that one too well. Is they had a lot of interesting features in it that kind of disoriented you. Because at one point you could see water
Going uphill.
Yeah, dripping up, seemingly uphill. And at one point, there's also where you kind of go down a corridor, and I guess they had a lot of forced perspective, and you could have one person go to the end and look back, and your little friend would be so small, but then looking the other way, they would be so huge.
Wow. I do remember going in there, I think, with you at some point and experiencing all of that.
Yeah, and they also had this weird kind of like sound effect. It made it seem like it was magnetic.
Right, yeah.
Where it was like almost mesmerizing to the point of almost driving you to madness, perhaps.
Oh my gosh.
And I liked that they had multiple caves there in the Magic Kingdom.
Yeah. Was that the main differences between the two?
Well, the thing is, the Disneyland never had the magnetic mystery mine.
Right. But was everything else the same?
No.
They didn't have Harper's Mill and all
that?
They
did have their own mill. They had Harper's Mill. They had Potter's Mill, one of which was a grist mill, one of which was kind of like what's the other kind of mill?
A windmill?
A windmill, thank you. But also, the island at Disney World's Magic Kingdom, there's actually two islands. And in order to get to the fort on the back island, you had to take the suspension bridge.
Oh, right.
To get there, which connected the two islands. But then their fort had a different name, Fort Langhorne. Sometimes it was called Fort Sam Clemens. I'm not sure when it was.
It was in 1996 that they changed it for some reason. That seems like so random to have suddenly
done. What about the spelling of Langhorne when they had it that way?
They left the E off somehow.
Because, it was, of course, named after Samuel Langhorne Clemens, whose name has an E at the end, but the fort did not. I don't know why. But that one also had an escape route from the fort, which was always fun. They also had the Fidgety Ledge. Roundabout Rock, Hooky Holler. Some of these, I know the Roundabout Rock was very similar to the Merry-Go-Round Rock at Disneyland, which is kind of a feature. It spun around, yeah. And eventually they got rid of them due to,
upkeep.
Litigious concerns.
Oh, yes.
And the Teeter-Totter Rock was an actual rock that
went
teeter-tottered.
over. Yeah.
They
don't make kids like they used to.
Yeah,
so.
That's the thing. We'd be able to run free and just have fun, and people wouldn't worry. And if we fell down and scraped a knee, who cares? Right? But
no one cared. That's what it was like.
That's right. The Magic Kingdom, they also had Aunt Polly's.
Oh, right. Yes. I don't think I ever really got anything there because when I went, it was already not open very often.
Oh, that's right. I guess they closed it before that. They used to serve peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and drinks and snacks. It would be a good place to grab a little snack and just kind of sit out on the dock there and just kind of watch the world go by.
My only experiences in the 80s and beyond of Tom Sawyer Island was reading about it in the Birnbaum guidebooks, the official guidebooks. And that's probably why I never went, because he scared the bejesus out of me with Injun Joe's cave. I thought that Injun Joe was in there and he was going to get me.
Well, that's the thing is there was a place where you could kind of hear almost like moaning. Almost, yeah.
Scary.
Because, in the story, Tom Sawyer, he gets lost in the cave there.
Yeah.
And eventually succumbs to just not being able to find his way out.
Yeah, I think I had probably read Tom Sawyer or something and then read about this, and I was like, I'm not going in a cave. I was very easily scared. Like, Haunted Mansion was my limit back then.
Yeah, they had all kinds of things in the cave, as I mentioned, like a moaning, possible Injun Joe. I know that at one point, and I actually cannot remember if this was the Magic Kingdom or at Disneyland, they had a place right about where the little bridge crossed over the chamber of the bottomless pit, where there was like a little gap right where your feet are, and there would be a person backstage who would be able to just kind of brush up against your foot.
That's terrible.
And
I don't like that at all.
And I remember examining that just to see, is that really a thing? And I think it was, but I'm not sure. A lot of
Maybe it
weird
just happened
things
to
like
you.
That. But then there were also a couple of places where they kind of made it so it seemed like you could get lost. Like if you were to take a left here, and it just kind of went around in little circles, and they tried to make it disorienting, and I thought that was fun.
It was fun.
And I know at Disney World also in the Injun Joe's cave, at one point you got into a large room, and the rock formations made it seem almost like a devil's face in a big room.
Yeah,
a big
I think
chamber.
there was a picture of that or something, maybe in the Birnbaum book. Did they have the paintbrush thing in Disneyland?
Not that I ever remember, but then I also never really did that at Disney World, where they did.
Yeah, it was like a rope drop situation.
Yeah, where they would hide.
I feel like it must have been maybe in the 90s only kind of thing, because you got a fast pass if you found it.
Also into the early 2000s,
Oh, okay.
where they would hide little paintbrushes somewhere on the island, and any kid that would find one would be able to turn it into one of the workers and exchange that for a fast pass. This, of course, coming from the story of Tom Sawyer, where he was painting the fence with whitewash and would trick his friends into doing the work for him because he made it seem like it was a really super fun thing to do. But I never experienced that myself.
Yeah, me neither, because I hadn't been. And then by the time I did go, they got rid of them already because people were like stealing them or...
People.
Yeah.
Tokyo Disneyland, when it opened on April 15th, 1983, it opened with a Tom Sawyer Island. The very first time that park actually opened with a working Tom Sawyer Island. And I've actually been to that one a couple of years, 2010, 2011, which was awesome. A lot of fun. A lot of the same features, and they still have that to this very day.
Wow.
And you'd be able to take their steamboat, and it goes around that island as well.
Did they still have the burning cabin?
I don't remember there being a burning cabin there.
I have read a little bit about it, and everyone seems to say that it was like deteriorating pipes or something, like it wasn't kept up well. But I feel like maybe people would be, there's a lot of dumb people in the world. So maybe they were like, there's a cabin on fire, and they were just like sick of dealing with people.
But the thing is, the burning settlers cabin was always in an uninhabited, inaccessible part of the island.
Like you couldn't walk
that you
up
could
to
only see from the steamboat. And of course, having to include the gas that would keep the thing ablaze would I would imagine be an issue as well.
Yeah.
So now they have like an eagle. At one point they did have the settlers, and at one point he was struck with an arrow, an errant arrow for some reason. But then at some point they changed that so that he was kind of just drunk off of his keister.
Yes.
And his cabin was burning, and then there was an eagle in a nest nearby observing the whole thing. Yeah, so they've definitely altered that and tried to clean it up a little bit over the years.
But they have recently in Disneyland, on the train loop, they have updated the Native American settlement to give it some more deference, I guess you could say.
Oh, very much so.
So.
Yeah, even to this day, especially when you go either on the train there or on the Mark Twain steamboat. Lovely images of them, reading, telling stories. The little child with the dog that's nearby.
What about any weird things that may have happened in
I
Tom Sawyer
forgot.
Island?
There was this one thing that happened in the year 1970. There was it was a strange time back then when they had a lot of anti-establishment people who were, trying to stick it to the man. They were called Yippies, and there was a day, I believe it was August 6th, 1970, just about 3 weeks before I made an appearance in the world, where they essentially tried to take over Disneyland. They all paid their way.
Which is,
into
I
the
think, the
park.
funniest part
Yeah, and
of
actually,
the story to me.
Dick Nunes, he had heard about all of this, and he was kind of ready for them. And he had a whole bunch of police presence, and they had plain clothes officers, to try to keep the peace. A lot, and these people were very identifiable at the time by their long hair, which back then kind of meant that you were kind of anti-establishment.
Peace and love,
Yeah,
man.
they were trying, they were protesting the Vietnam War. They chose that date because it was the 25th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima. They had the security kind of set them aside search their bags, which was unheard of at the time, just to make sure that they didn't have anything. But they did have some things because
Funny cigarettes?
There were some funny smelling cigarettes all throughout the park that day. Yeah, they were just openly smoking marijuana all around, cursing.
Whoa.
Yeah, and just causing a ruckus. They were they were expecting a lot more people to show up for this.
Including their leader.
Including Abby Hoffman, who just actually never showed up. And so there were about 300 there on that day. And they were just kind of directionless. And at one point they decided, you know what, we should go to Tom Sawyer Island and take over the fort. And they actually did manage to go to the island, and they kind of took over the fort. They took down the United States flag, and they flew the flag of the Viet Cong on there.
Which they just happened to have with them, I guess.
Yeah, they did.
As you
happen
do
to have
in the
that.
70s.
Eventually they got bored and they left there, and then they caused a ruckus on Main Street.
Yikes.
And then eventually Dick Nunes was like, all right, we've had enough. You're causing too much of a disturbance. We warned you. We tried to not have people ruin the other day guests' day, but they did. And so they actually shut down Disneyland for only the second time ever.
Wow.
They shut it down early. The first time was for the assassination of John F. Kennedy. But this was the second time, and they actually shut down the park early, and then there was all kinds of ruckus out in the parking lot, and they were doing damage to the landscaping and to people's cars. Yeah, it was kind of a mess. But yeah, they called that the Yippie Day, and I think you'd be able to find videos of that. People who have made videos of that crazy day.
Wow.
On YouTube, probably.
It's kind of funny. I don't want to put this idea out in the world. Well, I guess, things are searched and whatnot now. But it's kind of funny that nothing like that has happened since then. I guess maybe that
I think
clued them in to have stronger.
Well, see, I think I
awareness.
had mentioned that Dick Nunes was ready for these people because, they had put flyers out trying to invite people, get people to come out. And Dick Nunes had known about this, and he actually had a bunch of officers. I think he even had either the Air Force or the Marines ready to,
Wow.
on hand to, like on call to be able to get them over here on a moment's notice. The Fullerton Police and all kinds of things. So
Don't mess around with Dick Nunes.
that's right. I mean, I actually heard stories of him actually taking
care of some business.
treating some of these yippies a little rough, as Dick Nunes was wont to do back in the day.
I can imagine. So at some point in time, they turned Disneyland's Tom Sawyer Island into the Pirate's Lair.
Well, even before that, they kind of created the staging of their brand new nighttime spectacular Phantasmic, which premiered in May of 1992. I just happened to be at the opening day of that. I was completely unaware of it at the time. But yeah, as I'm sure most of you have probably seen, that Phantasmic.
I have,
right?
in fact.
That literally takes place on Tom Sawyer Island, with using the Mark Twain steamboat at the finale, as well as the sailing ship Columbia. At one point they used it as Peter Pan and Captain Hooks, which they still do to this day. And at one point they changed that to Pirates of the Caribbean.
Jack Sparrow.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, they used that, and at one point I guess it was even the scene of a fire.
Oh,
because
right.
Maleficent turns into a
dragon thing, yeah,
who breathes fire, and that caught on fire very
sad.
Recently.
I don't like when dragons catch on fire.
No, and they do that from time to time in various locations.
It's true.
But anyway, so that happened in May of 1992. So they actually had to move one of the mills because it was in that location.
That makes sense.
So they kind of shifted it off to the side. And then, as you mentioned, I believe in the year 2007, with the popularity of the Pirates of the Caribbean movie franchise, they kind of changed the theming of Tom Sawyer Island there at Disneyland to Pirate's Lair at Tom Sawyer Island.
Yeah.
Where in some of the caves they included like a bunch of features with a couple of pirates.
There's pirates in there?
There are pirates in there, yes, and a bunch of, even like that little skull ball.
And like the beating heart thing. Mm-hmm. I remember that now.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing pirates in there.
You might have.
I probably was scared and didn't look.
They're there. But there's a lot of treasure, a lot of, bunch of the features that kids get to play with, where they kind of turn a wheel and something comes up out of the cove there.
And at that time, they shut down the fort, right?
They didn't shut it down. Oh, yeah, they did at that point.
Termites.
That's right. Yeah. And so they closed down the fort. I totally forgot about that. They still have the caves in the back that was part of the escape route out of the fort.
But you can't get into the fort.
Yeah, they shut off the part where you can connect it to the fort. There are some really great views along those paths of the Mark Twain riverboat, the sailing ship Columbia. I really enjoy going out there and taking a look at that.
The one and only time I went there with you, we actually had that little band of pirate musicians.
Oh, that's right.
Rusty Cutlass, I believe.
Yeah, they actually took the raft out there too, and they were playing.
It was just like a very magical moment.
It really was.
Because there wasn't that many people on the island, and so we were just like sitting there listening to them.
And those performers are fantastic. They're usually kind of wandering around New Orleans Square, but they just happened to take the raft over, and were performing for just the few guests that were out there.
Hopefully everything stays as is or stays put in Disneyland.
In Disneyland, yes. I really hope that...
even though it's not, it's really a shadow of its original self
already. There are several things that have shut down. But I was there on our most recent trip, and I actually went out there on the island. It was actually 5 days before the big announcement that we're about to talk about. And, I was basically just kind of reliving my youth. I took all of the little paths and through all of the, especially through Castle Rock, that are really meant for smaller children.
Oh my gosh!
But I can fit. Yes, I bumped my head a few times, but I can still scamper my way up there.
Pulling their children away from you as you're wandering.
No.
By
I was letting the kids who were running around to be able to go. But I was basically saying it's not only for kids. It's for kids at heart, like myself.
You definitely are one of those.
But it reminded me how amazing all of the different caves and paths and little hidden walkways and things there are. And it really is amazing. And that's just one of the amazing features about Tom Sawyer Island to begin with, is the fact that it's different than a regular Disney attraction where the Imagineers, they make it a certain length. They kind of direct what you see and how you see it. This is an attraction where the kids come and go out there, can explore and do things their own way and make it the way they want and take as long as they want doing it.
Yeah.
I love that about Tom Sawyer Island. So it's kind of sad a little bit that there is that announcement, which, what was this announcement?
Well, I mean, we talked about it previously, but that the Tom Sawyer Island here in Walt Disney World will become an all-new Cars Land area with 2 new Cars Land attractions, which, new is just, I guess, a new environment, but it's, I think, going to be the same type of attraction as Radiator Springs Racers, but this is a road rally type off-roading situation.
And I guess they're shutting down the Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer Island to make it all fit.
Yeah, so that part I'm super not happy about.
Yeah, and I kind of, on the one hand, I get it because not a lot of folks actually make their way out to the island.
Right.
Because I guess they figure, of the trouble that it takes to get out there, but it really is worth it.
Yeah.
To head out that way.
It's a different time, and people that are planning and coming here either once in a lifetime or once every 5 years or something like that really spend the time to go on the attractions and really make every moment count. So I get it, but that said, I really will miss just the calming element, the natural element of it all, being able to see the boat traffic, go around the island there, great views of Big Thunder Mountain, Haunted Mansion, that kind of thing. Plus, being able just to go around the little back corner that very few people get to see. Yeah. I do hope they add a lot of water features and waterfalls and all of that.
And I'm sure that they will.
And shade.
Yes, and I am sure that they will. And I'm sure what they will make will be absolutely fantastic. And hopefully there will be a lot of, hidden paths and different ways to view it all, just to kind of make up for the lost wonder of Tom Sawyer Island.
I really can't believe they're getting rid of the Liberty Bell? Lily Bell?
Liberty Bell, yeah. Which used to be the Richard F. Irvine.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it was kind of, the icon of Liberty Square.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what kind of views there will be that'll be replaced. The view of being able to see kind of like the Liberty Bell with the Haunted Mansion in the background from that one spot in Frontierland over by where Country Bear is will be no longer, right?
Maybe they'll just leave. Well, I don't know how much they're taking up.
Yeah,
maybe they'll just leave the boat there. And
it would be nice if they kept the rivers there in some form.
All right.
Because like the essentially the quote unquote Tom Sawyer Island-ish area of Disneyland Paris, that's where they have the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, which goes underneath the riverway to the attraction. Maybe they could do something like that, although you can't really dig too deep in Florida.
That's true.
So,
eventually you'll just...
We will see what they'll
underwater.
make, and I'm sure what they'll make will be absolutely fantastic. I will just miss what we have now.
That does it for our deep dive to Tom Sawyer Island, and we didn't even get wet.
I think that's because we didn't take the pontoon bridge, that crazy barrel bridge that if you step on it just so, you could actually get your foot soaked.
Yeah.
We didn't do that.
I managed to never do that, but...
I did. Many, many times.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing I hate more than wet socks. Which is why I don't usually wear socks to the parks anymore, because...
Exactly. So you'd be
you
fine on the
sandals,
pontoon bridge.
You're covered. Right. Maybe there will be a pontoon bridge to Cars Land. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive to Tom Sawyer Island, and there will be many more deep dives to come. We might revisit some things that we've discussed before to add any additional history or news to those topics. And if you have something you'd like us to take a deep swan dive into, just let us know in comments wherever you find us. And if there's one thing we know that Tom and Huck and Becky Thatcher, is that her name?
It is her name.
Would want you to do. It is to like and subscribe to Up the Waterfall. You can chat with us on Instagram at Up the Waterfall Show. We're on Threads. We're on TikTok. You may see some of our silly TikToks and reels that give you a little preview of what's to come on our shows, which I think are very funny. And we'd love to hear from you and hear what you want to hear more of.
It's your way of holding up that little chalkboard saying, I love you.
It's so true. And thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time up the waterfall.
Bye now.